Hey there, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. This is now video number 5 in our series on finance. And in this particular lecture, I've chosen to entitle this, The Parent in the Room. Finance serves as the parent in the room, many ways. In a practical sense, quite frankly, in an emotional sense sometimes as well. It is the voice of reason and responsibility in light of multiple requests for capital to spend. The parent in the room sits and looks at his wallet and says many times, that's great that you want these things, but this is what we can afford. That's exactly the role that finance takes in business when making capital decisions. So let's review just briefly. What is business about? Well, we've talked about it this entire semester. Business is all about going about and executing activities to earn profit. Remember, we've talked about this from the very first day in class. Profit equals revenue minus expenses. Profit keeps the lights on. Profit allows you to return dividends to your shareholders, make a return to your owners, as well as accomplish great things in the world. All of that's only made possible if you earn profit. And in today's world, in fact, in every world, it has always taken risky activities to earn that profit. It takes a degree of risk in order to earn higher than normal economic profit. And so business wants to be engaged, needs to be engaged in those relatively risky activities in order to earn a profit. In order to do those things, it needs capital, it needs investment, it needs resources to execute on those risky activities. Risky activities that therefore will earn a return, a respectable return on invested capital to the business, to the investors, to the owners, to the shareholders. This is what business is about. And therefore, there are several different sources of capital that a business can turn to in order to get this capital to do these risky activities and earn a profit and make a return to the sources of investment. These are sketched out in a supplemental video that we've given you from the textbook, also in this module, and we'll list them off here in this slide as well. Some of the sources of capital that business routinely turns to: loans. They borrow money. Businesses borrow money in one of two different forms, secured loans or unsecured loans. And another source of capital, investors who will bring capital to the table, like angel investors or venture capitalists. Businesses can also choose to issue bonds. We'll look at that in another video in this very module. However, for now, suffice to say, bonds are issuing IOUs. It's debt that you have to repay if you're a company. And finally, the last source of capital we'll consider in this particular module, a business can sell or issue stock in a stock offering, a public offering. It's a way to gain investment capital by selling off part of the ownership interest in the company. Now, for our purposes in this particular video, though, why do we talk about these sources of capital in terms of being the parent in the room? And that is because as the parent in the room, if you as the finance department are going to make some decisions to secure capital that your business needs to accomplish and execute on those risky activities, some of the considerations you need to make as a wise finance decision maker, when you get this capital from whatever source you decide to get it from, will you have to repay it? And when you do repayment, will that repayment be at a particular schedule, at a particular point in time? Do you make periodic payments? Do you make payments of interest in the interim, where you simply pay back all the principal on the due date? All those things to consider means that your capital comes at some overall cost. And what is the cost of your capital? How much does the money cost you? In addition, when you borrow those funds, does it come at some loss of control? It can be a loss of control in terms of opportunity costs, or quite frankly, a real loss of control when, for instance, you issue stock and you sell off voting rights, some share of voting rights to other shareholders. And then, of course, in all these capital considerations, the wise, experienced finance decision maker has to consider what happens with all of this capital in a worst case scenario. Will we still owe these people if it all goes to hell in a handbasket and we declare Chapter 11 bankruptcy? Can those debts be adjudicated in a bankruptcy proceeding? Will they follow us along like tax liens? What happens with capital considerations and all of these particular types of factors and elements that need to be considered when we're thinking of where and what sources will we use to get the capital, at what cost, under what terms of repayment, how much control is lost, what's the worst case scenario? As a result, there are several different sources of capital. We look at them here. There is the secured loan. That is a loan that is secured by some sort of collateral, a pledge to the asset. You can see the definition from the textbook: a loan to finance an asset backed by the borrower, pledging the asset as collateral to the lender. Now, the simplest form of secured loan for our illustrative purposes here is when an individual gets a car loan to buy a car. The loan, of course, is collateralized by the actual automobile, and therefore, if you stop paying and you default on the loan, then the repo man comes and takes the car away. Now, from a business perspective, many times the loan is secured by, for instance, the factory or the tractor or the combine or the machinery that you are using the loan to borrow it by. And of course, you know what happens if you stop paying the loan. Anyway, the thing to notice here, of course, in a secured loan, the loan is pledged by collateral. It's secured by collateral that is used to fulfill and to honor repaying the loan. Therefore, you will have a principal amount that must be repaid, as well as interest over and above that. Now, that's true, of course, both in a secured loan and an unsecured loan. You can see the unsecured loan, a loan for which collateral is not required. Now, from a lender's perspective, of course, consider, is the unsecured loan higher risk to you as a lender, or is a secured loan a higher risk as a lender? We'll just consider. If the borrower defaults on the loan, what happens on a secured loan? Well, you get to take back the collateral. But if a borrower defaults in an unsecured loan, what are you left with? Well, absolutely nothing. You don't have any collateral. Therefore, of course, an unsecured loan is more risky than a secured loan. And if an unsecured loan is more risky, what would you presume in terms of the interest rate on those loans? You're absolutely right. An unsecured loan will have a higher interest rate than a secured loan, and quite frankly, will probably also have a shorter time period, because the longer the time period stretches out, the higher the risk and uncertainty whether or not the borrower will repay the entire amount. Other sources of capital. Investors, outside investors, who may be wealthy individuals like angel investors, or maybe syndicated private funds like a venture capital fund, a collection of wealthy individuals, and a fund administrator who manages the funds, does all of the investment decisions on behalf of these wealthy individuals or institutional lenders as a way to earn a higher than normal economic return. Now again, returning to you as the finance manager, as you are collecting these forms of capital, the questions that you will need to be answering: what projects am I funding? Why am I collecting this capital? Who has asked for me to be able to come up with $2.5 million in capital for next year's expenditures? Is it a marketing budget? Is it a new project? Is it manufacturing? Where is the request for money coming from? How much is the project requesting? And if the project is successful, what's the return projected on that investment? Because I have to compare what is the projected return on this project versus the cost of borrowing the capital or securing the capital in the first place. The principle, of course, is if the cost of the money is 6% per year and the project is only returning 5% per year, there's no way I should go forth with the project. I'm better off not getting the capital to begin with rather than losing 1% just to accomplish the project, right? However, if my cost of capital is 6% year on year and the project is projected to return 12% return on the investment, well, then I'm making good money and I need to get that capital in the hopper as quickly as possible so we can actually start executing on that project. In other words, when I say that finance has to be the parent in the room, the parent has to decide who are we saying yes to and who are we saying no to. What projects are we going to fund? What projects are we going to ask to re-examine? And quite frankly, which projects are we simply going to say, no, it doesn't meet our criteria as a project for this company to fund. It may be a great idea, but it doesn't look like it's going to earn a sufficient return to justify the cost of capital that we would have to incur in order to get the money to fund this project. Those are all important decisions that finance needs to make on behalf of the long-term well-being of the company. This is really the key and most important function of finance to a business, to be able to secure the funds necessary for all of the worthy projects that are proposed by management, and also to do a little bit of examination to figure out which of these proposed projects are actually worthy based upon our expected weighted average cost of capital. I hope this makes sense. This is really the heart of what finance does for the ongoing concern, for the business. We have looked at finance beginning with a look at the time value of money, how that is either working for or against you, and now we begin to look at it from the perspective of finance in the business. What is business trying to accomplish with the finance function? We have a couple more lectures in this series, but I hope that you're beginning to get a sense how finance is very, very much its own discipline and distinct and different than the accounting function. I think now that you're getting a better flavor for what finance accomplishes for the sake of the business, how finance and accounting really do work hand in hand as very distinct but complementary functions as we consider the future financial well-being of the business. I hope that helps. We'll see you in the next lecture.